Hello, everybody. So, this is a follow-up to my quite controversial video of the topic why I play Deep Prot in Classic Hardcore. So, I'm doing this to clear up a little bit my reasoning for playing Deep Prot and why I think it's better. Because some of the comments I got for the last video, they've been absolutely unhinged. I mean, look at this guy. He threatened to send me a letter bomb for playing Deep Prot. That's absolutely crazy. Absolutely unhinged. What the hell is this? Before I talk about the specifics, let me start this video with a little bit of anecdotal evidence. So what we have here is a Molten Core raid, and we have a Fury Prot tank. He's tanking Magmadar with dual wield, and Magmadar gets enraged. Now, he drops very low, and I taunt to save him. Now let's see what happens. How much damage does he take, and how much damage do I take after I taunt? So he's dipping low. I taunt here, and check my frame here. I avoid all of the damage basically. I take 0 damage. Now of course this is all chance, but I will explain later that in my case the chance is a lot higher. Okay, let's get a little bit more in detail with regards to the reasoning. Let me open by saying this. The current culture of Classic WoW overall, not just hardcore, where you get all the world buffs, you get every single potion in the game, every single possible DPS increase so you can parse. It causes that the DPS checks are already fulfilled. We are totally fine on DPS. We just need to focus on survival. So the issue is, right, in this parse culture, everybody is trying to be the first on the damage. Everybody is making extremely risky plays just to try to parse, and it's endangering everybody, right? And I've seen people pull threat on trash, and die from it, even if it's a Fury Prot tank. So a big part of why I play Deep Prot on hardcore is psychological. It's not just the increased mitigation that I'm after. I will talk about that later. I will reiterate what I said in the previous video. But the biggest part why I play Deep Prot on hardcore is really psychological. It is to get into the mindset and get everybody else in the mindset of, okay, this is serious business. We're not doing this for parsing. DPS is important on some fights, but what is much more important is playing the mechanics correctly. It's not over aggroing. And first of all, there's this psychological part on their side, right? If they know they have a Deep Prot tank, they will try to, take care of their threat, right? If it's a Fury Prot tank, then they're gonna be like, oh, well, look, I can DPS as much as I want. I'm going to parse here. And they don't even look at their threat meters, right? I don't play with add-ons, but everybody else does, right? So everybody plays with threat meters, and they don't even look at them when they're trying to parse them when they have a Fury Prot tank. So let's also look at the psychology of the tank itself. Why is it better from the psychological point of view of the tank to be playing Deep Prot? Well, as I said in the original video, it feels good to do damage. It feels good. So the more you get comfortable with playing your character and doing your damage, the more risks you're gonna take. I'm not saying over like a week, but maybe over months, you're gonna start to get comfortable just dual wielding and tanking, and nothing's happening to you at all. So you're gonna be increasingly using your dual wield instead of the shield, right? And then something happens, you get crit several times in a row or crushed, then there's gonna be a mispull. Your healers are gonna be screwing up something, something like that can easily happen. Given enough time, something like that will happen. And you will get caught off guard potentially. Maybe not if you're a good player, but somebody else might get caught off guard. They will not be able to heal you up. Given enough time, something bad is basically going to happen. So it's basically a way to prevent yourself from getting comfortable. It is a psychological thing. Now, another reason why I play deep prot is very deeply tied also to the first reason. I won't go into detail on this, but it's basically a criticism of the classic player base. It's a criticism of everybody just playing for the meters. Everybody has min-maxed this 20-year-old game to its absolute maximum. But this is hardcore. They're still min-maxing DPS. They should be min-maxing survival. And what I see is like people will argue with me that the more DPS you do, the shorter the fight is, the safer it is. Which, and pay attention to this, as long as you don't sacrifice anything for it, is true. But then I see contradictions, like recently it came out that Warcraft logs, they're invalidating any parses which have the engineering chicken, right? So, if people really cared about safety by the means of having high DPS, they would keep using the chicken as they have been until now. But once they made a change in somewhere outside the game on a website, they immediately stopped using the chicken in BWL. Now, why is that? Well, because they don't care about the safety, really. What they care about is actually the logs. But I would say that has no place on hardcore because it encourages bad and dangerous gameplay. You make sacrifices, you take risks just for the purpose of being ranked higher on a website, and actually you're not making the boss fight any safer at that point. You're making it more dangerous. To add to that, this glass cannon gameplay, where you just nuke everything down in hopes to be able to bypass as many mechanics as possible, I would argue that this approach is a little bit flawed. I would argue that it's much better to do the mechanics safely. Right? For example, on the Molten Core lava packs, just equip fire resistance gear. Usually the whole raid GFPPs and nukes down the flame worker, right? And that's a perfectly valid strat, but to avoid maybe 2 fire blossoms in a row, but you can get 3. It's extremely unlikely, but you can get 3. So why not? And there's also the other things that can happen, like the stuns, etc. We've even had a double pull on my in one of my raids, and that's when some people died. But I would argue just equip some fire resistance gear. I mean, of course, your DPS is gonna suffer a little bit, and the flame workers need to die fast. But I mean, everybody already has world buffs. They're gonna die fast anyway. You equip 100 fire resistance is gonna make a huge difference, but the DPS loss is gonna barely be noticeable. And that's because a huge portion of your DPS comes from world buffs and consumables. Now, I'm going to admit that there are boss fights in Classic WoW where playing Fury Prot and going for the glass cannon strat makes perfect sense, right? There's somewhere it actually makes perfect sense according to me, right? So we're talking about Onyxia, right? Because you need to nuke her down fast in phase 2 so she doesn't do a deep red, and then in phase 3 you need maximum threat possible in order to be able to pick her up because her threat table is absolutely weird. And that's totally fair. We have Veilstras, we have Hohoran, Okay, so these are some examples where I think it's this glass cannon kill as fast as possible is strat is perfectly valid. Okay, but enough ranting about that. We've covered the philosophy, we've covered the psychology, and now let's get a little bit more into the specifics. By specifics, I mean let's take a look at what the prot offers that Fury prot doesn't. Let's start with looking at the Fury prot talent tree. All right, so I have here the traditional run-of-the-mill Fury prot spec. So this is what Fury prots go for, okay? They have to get all the mitigation here. So toughness, improve shield block, shield spec, blood rage, last stand, and then they have to get defiance for the threat, right? So this is run-of-the-mill Fury prot spec, right? But there are things which are mitigation which they are not getting. 5% parry, okay? Well, in principle, they could drop something and get the parry, right? But then they're dropping like, yeah, maybe threat, right? Which is exactly what they're going for, which that's that kind of counterproductive. Apart from that, they are not getting anticipation. They can get defense, right? This is potentially up to 10 defense. And I'm going to argue that defense is actually an excellent stat. But I'm gonna talk about that a little bit later. What else they're not getting is 2-second cooldown reduction on taunt. I mean, that's huge. That's huge. What they're not getting is 5 more seconds on shield wall. And some people told me, look, you're just going to be using recklessness. You're not gonna be using shield wall, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. You should not use recklessness. Look, it's increased damage taken, 20%. You need to switch to Berserker stance to go and to get it. So for a while you have even 30%. It's not the mindset I would tank with on classic hardcore. Now, let's take a look at one more other thing, right? So people also say that the deep prot doesn't provide any more mitigation than Fury prot. Well, we've already talked about anticipation and deflection, but let's not forget one more thing. People who play Fury prot, they will deathwish. They will deathwish, right? You see it on all the streams, even on the big damage bosses, they deathwish. Come on, that's ridiculous. You're lowering your armor and resistance by 20%. That's a lot. You don't need. You don't need to deathwish. Your raid doesn't need to do that much damage. Let's take a look at my spec. Yeah. So my spec would look a little bit like this. You have all the defensive goodies that you can possibly get. You have the deflection, you have anticipation, you have improved taunt, you have improved shield wall. None of that you get as Fury prot, and you don't pop anything crazy like Deathwish. Furthermore, you have the tactical mastery, so you can intercept easily. Potentially, you could put that into improved heroic strike if you want to. But the most important thing is you're getting all the defensive goodies. Now, let's talk a little bit about the defense. I know it's considered a bad stat by most people, especially on the accounts that it doesn't increase your DPS. However, I'm going to argue that in Hardcore WoW, this is an excellent stat. So as you can see here, every point of defense gives you 0.04% dodge, parry, block, reduced chance to be hit, reduced chance to be crit each. If you add that all up together, that is 0.2% of some kind of avoidance per point of defense. That means 5 points of defense gives you combined 1% of some kind of avoidance. I have about 80 points of defense, so that puts me at 16% more avoidance, opposed to somebody who has 0. Now, if somebody is playing 0 defense, they're chatting it up, right? They're not playing the parry talent. Now they have 21% less avoidance than I do. It's ridiculous. That's huge. Right? So defense is something that I directly aim for. And yes, high defense means less threat. More avoidance just means less threat. That's 100% certain because you get hit less, which means you generate less rage. That's just how it is. And for the Fury prot, it's even more so because they want to get crit, right? For the enrage. I don't want to get crit though. I don't want to take damage. I don't want to die. So about the threat, it's for sure lower. But I would just refer you to my earlier points about threat and damage. Such high damage just isn't necessary for classic content. Anyway, that is pretty much all that I wanted to say. If you got all the way here, thanks for watching. And if you agree with what I said, like and subscribe. If you disagree, you can dislike the video and come fight me in the comments. But yeah, you might also be interested in why I play Hardcore Classic without any add-ons, so I'll put a link to that video here. And yeah, that's it. And I'll see you either in the next video or on the stream. See ya! Bye!